The USCIS Form I-864 can potentially be enforced in state or federal court. Let's talk about both of those options. So the Affidavit of Support is required in all family-based immigration matters. Most of the cases that end up seeing the inside of a courtroom, however, are in marriage-based cases. So that means you necessarily have a divorce going on at some point. Can you enforce the Affidavit of Support in a divorce court? That turns out to depend a little bit on what state we're talking about. And the reason is that each state has its own rules governing alimony. Some states, Washington State in particular, has determined that the Affidavit of Support doesn't really relate to any of the factors that a judge can consider in an alimony determination. So basically here in Washington State, the courts say, well, it's a contract that exists under federal law, but we don't see a reason why that's the basis for an alimony order, even if the Affidavit of Support is enforceable. So here in Washington State, you can't consistently enforce the Affidavit of Support in an alimony order. Other states disagree. Texas, North Carolina, California, they all say that the Affidavit of Support can be enforced in an alimony determination. So that means if you're in a divorce, you can theoretically enforce the affidavit in the divorce process. Now, there are sometimes other considerations because states have their own rules on alimony, and the duration of alimony, the length of time that you get an alimony payment for, might be shorter than what is under the terms of the Affidavit of Support. So it might be the case that a court would enforce the Affidavit of Support, but you ultimately get less than you might expect because of considerations related to alimony. In federal court, on the other hand, it's only the Affidavit of Support that's at issue. So there aren't any other considerations related to alimony. The Affidavit of Support exists under federal law, so courts have jurisdiction to enforce the Affidavit of Support in the federal context. And in a federal court, that's the only thing that the court considers. So it doesn't consider anything related to custody or other considerations that happen in a divorce case. The only thing that's at issue is the Affidavit of Support. So sometimes you have two options. You can go to family court, but it's possible you might get a decision that's watered down based on other considerations, or you can go to federal court, but of course that means a separate lawsuit if you're already in the divorce proceeding. Either way, the Affidavit of Support can absolutely be enforced, and it's up to you as the person with the claim about where you want to bring that lawsuit.